And Esther hinted at what I did is I wrote it in the form of contemporaneous letters to the future, to my future grandchildren. So this book is made up of 28 letters to them, and I will read a few to you, and I'll discuss and comment on them as I go along. I'll try to leave enough time for questions and answers. I'm sure you'll have some questions following that. Normally, I just cover the period of the Holocaust. Now, after the war, when we were liberated, you know, etc., and I'll tell you where we went. But I happened to, through happenstance, wound up in Poland behind the Iron Curtain for 1 year. And that was an accident. We were not supposed to be there. So naturally, we were looking for a way to get out. And I will talk about that, how we stowed away on a ship to Sweden. Because while, as a young child during the Holocaust, I had no control over what was happening to me. At the time I was in Poland and later in Sweden. I was a young adult by myself with my brother, and the decisions and the things that I did were completely based on my own initiative. So let me start off by now this is September 10th, 1941, and it starts as follows. Recent events, most of them unpleasant, prevented me from writing sooner. Never mind that referring to what the Nazis are doing to us as unpleasantness is the height of understatement. I'll bring you up to date presently, but first I want to share the latest indignity which befell us this week. Starting last Monday, all Jews from the age of 6 must wear a yellow star of David with the word Judah, Jew, on the left breast. The stars are printed on cheap yellow muslin sheets and in an interlocking pattern, and are distributed by the Judenrat, which is the Jewish Committee office. After cutting them apart with scissors, each must be sewn securely on garments intended for outdoor wear. Thus, Oscar and I, Oscar was my brother, who are hitherto exempt from wearing the identifying armbands, will carry this badge with us wherever we go. The word Judah is spelled in a mock Hebrew font. Is this the Nazi sense of humor? And that's what I wrote in the book, but since then, you know, I sometimes ponder these trivialities. You know, this is a very good graphic design, and I wonder, and the Germans are good at graphics, I just wonder who was the character that designed it and what he thought of when he was doing it. You know, it's these kind of things that occur to you, and you just wonder how do people get around doing even such trivialities connected with what was happening. Anyway, additional all males must add the name Israel as a middle name to their ID card, and all women must add the middle name Sarah. I'm now Rudolph Israel Horowitz. Yeah. And I'll go now to October. These are the statistics of people who were deported from my hometown, Sosnowiec, during that wartime to Auschwitz. Now you see there is approximately 23,000 total. Before the war, there were about 30,000 Jews in that town of 130,000, so there's a very large community. After the war broke out, I think some left, so there were probably around 26,000. And as you see, there were 23,000 of them deported. Now I'm going to concentrate on the 8,000 number, which is in October, because that was something that was very, very traumatic experience when I was only 13 years old. Dear Oscar and Emma, this is October 26, 1942. Just when you think things can get any worse, they do. At the beginning of August, the Jewish Committee appealed to the public to comply with the Gestapo order to present themselves at the Great Union soccer field on the 12th of the month for the purpose of review and validating of documents. All the buildings in the ghetto were plastered with placards appealing for compliance with the order on said date. Everyone was wary of such orders, knowing that they inevitably lead to deportation to Auschwitz. In order to gain confidence of the Jews, the Germans conducted a similar review of identity documents in 3 small neighboring ghettos. In these localities, the activity was limited to stamping of the papers, and all the Jews were returned to their homes. On that day, we were allowed to leave the ghetto and walk freely on all the streets of Sosnowiec, previously off limits to Jews since September 1939. Since early morning of that Wednesday, the streets of Sosnowiec were filled with masses of Jews hurrying toward the Union Sports Stadium. Among them were men, young and old, women and children, even the sick from the hospital. Only the most gravely ill and infirm were allowed to remain in hospital upon presentation of proof of their condition to the Nazis. My grandfather was one of these seriously ill individuals and had been in the hospital for a couple of weeks. The only other ones who remained and hid were Jews who had no documents. My grandmother and little cousin Sarah were among the hidden ones. The Jewish population, numbering about 26,000, arrived at the stadium, where the Gestapo and the SS, armed with machine guns, surrounded us. Small tables were placed in a row according to the alphabet, and everyone had to register his name at the appropriate table. After the registration, the Gestapo crowded everyone at one end of the stadium, leaving the other side vacant. It was a very hot day, and the congestion was terrible. There was a feeling of imminent danger, and we were all panic-stricken. All families were ordered to appear before a commission who would make a life-or-death decision of all assembled. The commission was made up of Gestapo representatives and members of the Judenrat, which is the Jewish committee. Every Jew was evaluated and assigned to one of 4 groups, 1, 2, 3, and 4. The groups were directed to different locations in the vacant part of the stadium. Families with all members employed and without children or elderly were assigned number 1. Their documents were stamped and they were released. Young people who were not employed by the shops were assigned number 2 to be sent to labor camps. Families who had some members employed and had children were assigned number 3 and were subject to further review. Women with children, the unemployed, and the elderly were placed in group 4. This group was destined for deportation. My mother, my brother, and I were placed in that group. Night fell and rain began to fall. We were all soaked through and hungry, and the children wailed and cried. People were exhausted and couldn't stand up, sitting down and lying down on the rain-soaked ground. During the night, some people in our group attempted to save themselves by sneaking over to group 3, but the Gestapo noticed it and started shooting. The tumult and confusion led to the Gestapo to combine the 2 groups in one of some 10,000 people, all designated for deportation. We stayed there until the evening of the next day, when we were escorted under blazing searchlights in groups of a few thousand each by heavily armed Gestapo and crowded into 4 buildings vacated for that purpose. By coincidence, my grandparents' apartment where we lived was in one of those buildings. We found ourselves crowded into our own apartment with a few hundred other people. Gestapo, German police, and Jewish militia surrounded the buildings. We knew we were condemned to death and merely waited for transport. Overcrowding was unbearable. People were suffocating from lack of air. Some leaped to their death from 5th and 6th-story windows. Some people went insane. Most were completely resigned, but some tried to save their lives. In one instance, I saw a man perched on the sill of an open 5th-story window. Just as he was ready to jump, a German guard in the courtyard aimed his rifle at him and started shouting at him, The men stepped back and disappeared. I wonder what went through his mind. One group broke through a wall in the basement of an adjoining building and escaped. Some others escaped over roofs of adjacent structures. Some hid in empty carts, which were used to deliver bread to the victims. My mother left disguised as a nurse with the assistance of Dr. Shandowski, who was a colleague of my father's, wearing his ubiquitous white coat with stethoscope around his neck. Just about the same time, I started looking for Oscar to tell him that Mother was safe. I was astonished to find him in a rear ground floor apartment, perched on a pile of bedding, calmly reading a book. A few hours after Mother escaped, my brother and I were led out by Dr. Shandowski, who gave 2 bottles of whiskey to an already drunk German guard, telling him that our mother was a nurse working for him. During the next 3 days, approximately 8,000 exhausted old people, women and children, some of them sick or dying, were packed into cattle cars and deported to Auschwitz and their death. A week later, my grandfather, who was sick in the hospital, died of a heart attack upon hearing a false report that Mother, Oscar, and I went in that transport. It was odd to think of his death as a bittersweet event. The dying a natural death of old age was something to be thankful for. Grandma, Mother, Oscar, and I were the only ones attending his primitive funeral and burial. We followed a man behind a 2-wheeled pushcart, holding the body wrapped in a white shroud to the cemetery. Their grandfather was buried unceremoniously in an unmarked grave. Your loving Papa. Okay, now we go to April 15th, 1943. We have moved to Strodula, which was a working man's suburb, beginning of the year, and are living in a tiny house with 2 rooms. Up to now, it has been just Mother, Grandmother, Oscar, little Sarah, and I, but we expect that they will move at least 2 more families in with us any day. Last week, we received a letter from Father. He was in the Polish Army Reserve, and he was drafted when the war broke out, and we got separated. He was evacuated to Romania, and that's where he was during the war, so he was separated from. But now we received this letter with a document in Romanian and German, adorned and validated with various stamps and signatures. Here is a translation of the document into English. Embassy of the Republic of Chile, certificate. The Chilean embassy in Romania certifies here with Dr. P. Horowitz, owner of passport number 287, issued by the Chilean embassy in Romania, born on such and such a date in Drohobych, Poland, is married to Paula Horowitz, née Landsman, born on such and such a date in Sosnowiec, Silesia, has 2 children named Oscar, born, etc., and Rudolf, born, etc., in Sosnowiec, resides in Bucharest at Spintero Street 9. This certificate is issued to the above named individual for use as needed. Bucharest, 2nd March 1943. Father told us in his letter that he had concurrently sent a copy of this letter to the Schutzamt, which is the Swiss protection office in Berlin, which had the responsibility for protecting foreign nationals, requesting that they rescue his family. Mother went to the Judenrat and showed it to Dr. Lowenstein, the deputy of the chief of the Judenrat, who was very impressed. Just to explain to you this, my father, he was not a citizen. He really scammed the Germans. This was not false, but was, you see what the Chilean embassy did, they issued travel documents to Polish, veterans, so that they could travel. And it said on one page that he's a Polish citizen, and this is just a document for the purpose of traveling. Well, he had some friends that issued this document saying that he owned the passport and stamped it with all kinds of impressive strings. The Germans, being very punctilious, never suspected that he was not actually a citizen. Just assumed having a passport is a citizen. We didn't know this until we were liberated and we met him. We had no idea how he did that. But anyway, the following day, I was at home with Oscar. When Oscar came running, sobbing uncontrollably, tears streaming down his face, repeating, "Mother was arrested, Mother was arrested, she's gone." We were despondent, not knowing what to do, wondering whether the document we received and the letter Father sent to the Swiss in Berlin provoked the German authorities. We didn't have to ponder long, as two Jewish militiamen appeared at our door and took us into custody. We spent a sleepless, restless night in the militia office and resigned to the fact that if Mother is gone, we might as well go with her. The following morning, we were picked up by two uniformed Gestapo men driving a German-style Jeep and driven to Gestapo headquarters, and from there to the Sosnowitz prison. A German police officer started screaming at us, shouting out commands I could not understand, and then stepped up to me and slapped me in the face so hard I spun around facing the wall. Oscar, who was facing the wall, whispered to me that the German wanted us to face the wall. How come I did not understand it? We were then placed in a tiny cell where the trustee clipped our hair very close. The next morning, the cell door opened, and there was the police officer who slapped me, Dr. Lowenstein, who was from the Judenrat, and Mother. The German was not shouting anymore, and this time I understood every word he said. He spoke very politely and addressed Mother as Madam, and declaring that nothing serious happened to her boys except for the loss of hair, which after all will grow back. On that note, we were released and went back to Strudula with Dr. Lowenstein. Dr. Lowenstein explained to me that he intervened with the German authorities, reminding them that as foreign nationals we were under the protection of the Swiss Red Cross and the Geneva Convention. Amazingly, this did the tricks and we were released. So,
crack number one of all.
Yeah. Now, we were subsequently, we went through another incident where we were gathered like this for shipment, but we were saved from this. And eventually, eventually we were shipped to a internment camp in Liebenau, Germany, and was quite a experience because the German policeman who arrived to escort us was very polite. He took us in a streetcar to the train station, and we went through Vienna, and this shows you more or less the route we wound up. Liebenau used to be an asylum for the insane, if you will, run by German nuns. Of course, Hitler got rid of them, like he got rid of everybody, undesirable characters. So it was empty, and they made it into a internment camp for alien nationals, mostly British and American citizens, but there were also some South American. That's where we wound up, and we were there until January 1944. In January 1944, since this was a camp for women and children, some of the women complained that the two boys are getting to be older and they didn't want men there. So what happened next, they transferred us to a internment camp in France, in Vittel, France. And that shows you the way we went by train to Vittel. Now Vittel, I don't know if any of you have heard of Vittel. Vittel is a spa. They have Vittel water like Vichy water. And Can you hear me? And you know, it was fenced in. There were two sections. One section was British, one was American. And we were housed in a hotel, which is called Hotel Nouvelle. So you see, this was like getting from hell to paradise, because we were living in a hotel in a single room. It was very comfortable. We were receiving Red Cross packages once a week, and they even had a school, you know, so the school was running, was conducted in English, and we continued our studies, my brother and I. The long and short of it is that we were there until the invasion was on June 6, 1944. And of course the Allies advanced very quickly, and they arrived in Vittel on September 10th, 1944, when we were liberated. Exactly 50 years later, Ben, my late wife, and I went to France, and we went to Vittel to see it 50 years later, which was 1994. And we were there on June 10th, and nothing was happening. And I saw all the posters showing liberation September 11th. I wanted to keep the posters, I make a picture of the posters in the book. I went to the mairie, to the town hall, and I asked if I could get a copy. And then I asked the lady, I said, you know, why do you say the liberation was on 11th, was on the 10th? She says, oh no, it was on the 11th, I was there. I said, so was I. Well, the difference was that on the 10th, I saw an American Jeep for the first time, see a bunch of GIs, you know, coming in to a huge, you know, and I saw a couple of GIs with rifles and bayonets escorting a bunch of German prisoners. So I considered this, but on the following day, the General Leclerc, a French General Leclerc, marched in with a parade and an orchestra on a military band. So I always said, no wonder Chauvin was a Frenchman. Okay, well, we were liberated, and then we were transferred from there to a place in central France called La Bourboule, which is it was a DP camp, displaced persons, because we were all called displaced persons by the American authorities. They wrote a card with a number, and we stayed there until we went to La Bourboule in November 1944 and stayed there until, at that point, we found out that my father got out just in time out of Romania and he got on a ship on the Black Sea, and we went to Palestine. So we got in contact with him, and he was in Palestine. He wanted to bring us there. And in 19... Okay.
There's that one.
No, that's...
There's that.
Yeah, okay, this one, this is the next one. All right, so we went, we got on the ship, and we went to join him in July of 1945. And I had a strange experience on the ship, and I write about it in the book. Most of the refugees and the survivors on the ship were concentration camp survivors, which means that they survived, you know, Auschwitz or Buchenwald and all those. They all had numbers tattooed on the inside of their forearm. And I didn't, and I remember that I kept my sleeves down. And I didn't understand in those days, I was a youngster, what survivor's guilt is, but obviously I experienced survivor's guilt because I felt, you know, I got away with something because we managed to go from the ghetto to a place like this, and we did not suffer as they did. Anyway, I'm not going to dwell too long on what we stayed in Palestine before it was Israel. My father had two brothers that came to this country in the 20s. And he always wanted to come to the States. Anyway, we didn't want to stay in Palestine, or as it was becoming Israel, we registered for immigration to the state, and that's what we had to do. So when the war was breaking out, and when the United Nations declared Israel as a country, we left ahead, and through circumstances which I won't dwell on, but they're clearly described in the book. I stepped on a crack, and we wound up behind the Iron Curtain in Poland. And that was quite an experience, because all of a sudden, here where I am, and being in Poland was just a devastating experience. So we wound up getting a job, in a harbor office, and I tried to get out whichever way I could. We moved to a harbor town, Szczecin, which used to be German, but it's at the estuary of the. Let's see, let's go to this. Yeah, so we went from Haifa by way of Prague to Poland, and then you see we wound up in Warsaw. Went down to our hometown and just saw some people there, and everyone was amazed that we left Palestine and came to Poland because everyone wanted to get out. Anyway, it was just so. I said, well, the best thing we can do is go somewhere that's on the border, somewhere where you're close to getting out, not being in the middle of the country. So we went. I said, Szczecin is a good place. That used to be Germany before the war, but if you know. The borders of Poland shifted, The Russians took over the eastern part of Poland, Ukraine became independent, and the Poles took over the western part of Poland up to the Oder River, which was the border, and Szczecin was at the estuary. So eventually I got a job working for a shipbroker in the harbor, which meant that, and it was because of my knowledge of the English language. This was mainly a port that used to transport Polish coal up to Sweden. So you had coal, freighters coming in and out, and naturally you had to clear them in and do all the customs and clearance, and I was very, very important at the age of 20. I was walking around with a briefcase, everybody, all the guards and the harbor saluted me. I mean, it was just... even thinking back now, I say, how did it ever happen that I could do things like that? Anyway, and so I worked in the harbor, and I will take it and read you how we managed to escape. My brother always wanted to do only one thing. I mentioned already that at the height of the deportation, he sat and read books. He only wanted to study. That was his only passion. Even in Poland, he even thought of joining the Polish army because he could get into a university that way. But I didn't think of that. The one thing I wanted to do, I wanted to join the Polish Maritime Academy, which had a square-rig ship, and I wanted to get out that way, but I didn't pass this physical, so that was out. So, well, anyway, this is February 9th, 1949. And by the way, when we arrived in Poland, we were thrown in jail right away. We went straight to jail in Warsaw. The reason is that my mother, gave us some money for the trip, and it was naturally in dollars. And she didn't want it, she wanted to conceal it well, so she decided to give us small bills. It was a total of $300, most of it in singles, and she sewed it into all our clothes, into seams and everything. Well, we rattled it, we kind of rattled when we walked around, made noise. Well, certainly when where they checked us at the customs and the border guards when we got into Warsaw. They found all the money and they arrested us and threw us in jail for a week. Anyway, my brother wrote a letter to the prosecutor saying that we just repatriated and this was the only money we had as savings. We are not currency manipulated, so they let us out. So anyway, so this is February 9, 1949. Dear Oscar and Emma, it's exactly a year and a day since I wrote to you from that awful Pawiak prison in Warsaw. Here I am writing from jail again. We were arrested, in quotes, and brought here yesterday. But I'm jumping ahead, so let me pick up where I left off. By the beginning of February, Shujinsky, my boss, was anxious to send Oscar to Kolobrzeg. You know, what I tried to do is I said that if we're going to get out of here, my brother has to get a similar job to mine. And they lost an employee, so I brought him into my firm and he was being trained. But they wanted to send him to another harbor to do that work. So he wanted to send him to another harbor. Although he was ready to take on the assignment, I stalled, telling the boss that there were still some things he was unfamiliar with, and it would take another week to 10 days to get Oscar up to speed. I knew that the only chance we had to get out of Poland was together from Szczecin. Shujinsky reluctantly accepted, acceded to another additional week of training. The typical freighters on the coal run between Poland and Sweden are not very large. They resemble ocean-going barges with the engine room and the entire superstructure, bridge, officers' quarters, etc. located in the stern of the vessel. All the cargo holds are located forward with the crew quarters in the forepeak. The SS Britt-Marie, which docked on February 1st, is at least twice the size of the aforementioned vessels. It has a profile of a traditional ocean-going cargo ship, with the engine room and the entire superstructure, funnel, etc. located amidships, and in giant cargo holds fore and aft. I was assigned the task of clearing it in on arrival and subsequent departure. Since the ship came in empty, the formalities connected with its arrival were over quickly, and the local bureaucrats went ashore. Captain Carlson, Swedish Captain Carlson, whom I just met for the first time, asked me to stay for a while and invited me to share a drink. He spoke excellent English and told me that he seldom meets Polish brokers who speak the language and that he welcomed the chance to relax and chat. We spent a very pleasant half hour together. As I was about to leave, I somehow got the courage to share with him my fears that the secret police was after me and I faced arrest and imprisonment if I didn't get out of Poland soon. Just to let in, in the previous letter I indicated that we were called once to the secret police office. They had us wait there for about an hour, cooling our heels. We didn't know what was, and then released us. And then we heard from my boss that some secret policemen came to the office inquiring about us, and it didn't bode well for us. So I didn't want to wait to find out what it was about. Anyway, Captain Carlson just, I somehow got the courage to share with him my fears that the secret police was after me, and I faced arrest and imprisonment if I didn't get out of Poland soon. Stowing away on the Britt-Marie would save me from a life of misery. The captain got up from his chair and told me sternly that although I sounded sincere, he had no way of knowing if I myself was not a member of the secret police, acting as a provocateur and trying to get him in trouble with the authorities. He knew at least one such case which took place in Gdynia, Poland. He was not about to fall into a trap, as he was totally apolitical, especially in Poland. With that, he walked over to his desk, removed a large folded document from the drawer, and spread it on the top of the desk. We are both looking at the detailed plans and cross-section of his ship. Tracing his finger over various portions of the drawings, he murmurs half to himself, pointing out which are the good hiding places on the Britt-Marie. Elated, I spontaneously threw my arms around him in a big hug, thanking him for trusting me despite his misgiving. I go ashore full of anxiety and hope. Based on the ship's tonnage, I calculate it'll take about 2.5 days to load it, and if they finish loading it Thursday the 3rd, it should sail the following morning. Obviously, I cannot clear the ship out and hide and stow away on that same time. So Thursday morning, I stayed home from work, while Oscar was reporting that I came down with the flu and I was running a fever. That evening, we packed a few personal effects from some papers and the dollars in our briefcase and headed for the harbor. The Brit Marie was brightly illuminated with floodlights, and the cranes were busy loading coal into her holds. Judging from how high she was floating, I knew she had a lot more cargo to take on and would not sail the next day. As I turned to go home, I had the bad luck to run into my boss, Rudy. He was there to see the progress of the loading, as he had to fill in for my bedridden self the next day. Dumbfounded and at a loss for words, I quickly concocted a story about picking up some fabric that one of the captains on another ship was bringing home from Sweden for his girlfriend Margaret. You know, there was a lot of smuggling going on. The Swedes would bring in mostly cloth and goods like that, and some clothing. And she always wanted to get some fabric for dresses, etc. And which I did for her at times. So I told him that I was there to pick up the fabric. And yes, I still felt sick and feverish, and I got up from my sickbed to do this for her, and no, I doubt I'll be able to go to work tomorrow. Visibly angry, Shajirsky told me to get the hell out of there, go home, and that he would deal with me appropriately when I get back to the office. The following day, we waited till past 9 p.m., when the harbor activities and traffic settled down, before we ventured out. In the harbor, we moved furtively, sticking to the shadows, intent upon avoiding any unexpected encounters. Near the ship, we passed a border guard whom I knew quite well. I commiserated with him about being out in such cold weather. It was well below freezing at the time. He thanked me for my concern and offered that his shift was almost over, and he would be heading for a warm bed. I made a mental note that his relief would not be aware of us boarding the ship. By now the Brit Marie was settled way down in the water, but the loading was still continuing. 2 cranes, one fore and one aft, kept swinging back and forth, dumping coal into 2 gaping holes. The whole area was brightly illuminated with floodlights, both on shore and aboard ship. We went straight to the captain's cabin. He was very upset because it took a day longer to take up the camp, to take on the cargo than he expected, and the delay was costing his company money. He accordingly scheduled an early 6 a.m. departure. Despite his annoyance, Captain Carlson was expecting us and told me that he had tied a rope at the top of one of the giant ventilators, that's like a tube, which forces air into the interior of the ship as it moves forward. We had to climb down the rope, which he would then remove after us. When we got to the ventilator, we saw that it led straight down into a corner of a cargo hold, still being loaded. Several stevedores were down there working with shovels and directing the crane bucket where to dump the coal. There was no way we could get down that rope. Unnoticed. Back in the captain's cabin, I was getting desperate. He calmed me down, suggesting another even better hiding place, the coal bunker. What do I have to do? No,
Yeah, there's
I
one.
can't go to the next one yet. Okay. The bunker contains coal which is not part of the cargo. but is used to fuel the steam engine running the ship. It is located midships on either side of the engine room and is loaded through hatches on the upper deck on either side of the bridge. He handed me a flashlight and suggested that we head for the hatch on the water side of the ship, which would be in the dark. Although the hold was completely filled with coal, there were voids around the edges of the hatch through which we climbed and eased. There was adequate room to move around as we looked for a good hiding place. The coal fell through the hatch, tumbling down a 45-degree slope. You can see it on the lower sketch. It's a small, creating a small triangular tunnel between the bulwarks, which is the outside wall of the ship, and the deck above. Crawling into the space, we settled into a fetal position with our feet against the bulwarks and our knees up against our chins. In this contorted position, we managed to fill the triangular space on either side of us with loose coal, so that from the outside it appeared as if the space were filled in solid with coal. It was now past midnight. We were freezing. Although we wore most of the clothes we owned, it didn't make up for the below zero weather and the ice on the river separated from us, from our frozen feet by a quarter-inch of cold steel. Moreover, there was no way to move to improve in circulation in this confined space. Setting that aside, I concentrated on the events outside. By 1:30 a.m., the cranes were silenced. No more noise of tumbling coal. It was followed by the sound of the giant hatch covers being lowered and secured in place. Silence and waiting followed. At 5 a.m., I hear sounds of footsteps about. I can picture my boss, Straczynski, mad as hell for taking my place at this early hour. I also mentioned the border patrol coming aboard with bloodhounds for the first time in Szczecin. He says, would this be my undoing?
Finally, at 6 a.m., the engines wake up. The steady rumble of the engines is a sweet sound indeed and fills us with renewed hope. The Polish pilot is now guiding the Brit Marie in the open Baltic, all the way up the Odra into the Szczecin Lagoon, through its north end and into the open sea. This takes about 3 hours. By now, the heat from the engine room makes our hiding place more bearable. At noon, I hear the engines straining into reverse, then stop, and 15 minutes later, we are underway again. I assume we are a couple of miles offshore, and the pilot just climbed down a ladder into a launch, which shall take him back to Szczecin. Though I'm still in the coal bunker, I know from experience that this is what is happening above the deck. Though I know we are free, I'm still plagued by doubts. What if I miscalculated and the pilot is still on board? What if they discover my absence in Szczecin and a Polish patrol boat gives chase, stops the ship, and arrests us? What if Captain Carlson has a change of heart and upon seeing us turns the ship around and delivers us back to the Poles? I know this is all nonsense, but I decided it's best to spend another 3 hours in our hiding place before presenting ourselves to the captain. At 3 p.m. we emerge on the windswept deck and head for the captain's cabin. He grabs his flashlight from me and tells me that nobody knows about us, including himself, in quotes, and that we should report to the deck officer on the bridge. We climb the companionway to the bridge. The first officer is a short man about 5 feet tall, with an enormous white walrus mustache, wearing a captain's cap, a pea coat, and knee-high fur-lined boots. Looking toward the bow, he scans the horizon with his binoculars. As he pivots around, we come into his view. Dropping the glasses, he lets loose with a string of oaths, only one of them familiar. Yevlafan Polaka, God damn it, Polacks.
He gets on his horn, calls the captain. The captain arrives on the bridge. Feigns surprise, curses and yells in Swedish, then pausing, pretends to look at me closely, and in a mixture of Swedish and English, so his mate will understand. He says to me, although you look like you just came out of a coal mine, you look familiar. Aren't you working for the broker who cleared our ship in? I replied, yes, I am, and that my brother and I are escaping Polish communism. He countered that I'm complicating his life. He's a simple freighter captain. He'll have a lot of explaining and paper on our account, paperwork. Shutting the door behind him, he pulls out a bottle of aquavit from his vest, pours 3 glasses, and wishes us good luck. Offers a toast to our future. Expressing my gratitude for what he has done for us, I hand him $150 from our emergency fund. He's reluctant to accept it until I reassure him this was from an emergency fund for Poland. Now that we are out of Poland, the emergency fund is over. Besides, we still have had over $100 between us, and the money I offered him is just a token and will never really repay for what he did for us. The rest of the ship was uneventful. In order to allay any suspicion on the part of the crew that he was complicit in our escape, the captain made it known that to all that since we were getting a free ride to Sweden, we would have to be required to do some work during our passage. Thus, I was helping him with his paperwork in connection with the payroll, and Oscar was assisting the steward in the galley. Our destination is Norrtälje, a small port along the east coast of Sweden, north of Stockholm, and situated in the end of a long inlet 16 miles distant from the open Baltic. We picked up the pilot at the mouth of the inlet, who was accompanied by the ship agent's owner. When Captain Carlson told him of our situation, he went back ashore and phoned ahead advising the authorities in Norrtälje of our impending arrival. We docked some 2 hours later and were met by 2 officers in a police car. As I said in the beginning, we went in jail, right? In contrast to our previous experience with the authorities, they treated us with utmost courtesy and respect. We were placed in a cell with 2 comfortable beds, no wooden cots, and the door to the corridor was left unlocked. What a difference a jail makes. We just finished lunch, which, like all jail meals, is catered by the local hotel, delivered by a beautiful Swedish blonde. The wicker basket it came in is wrapped in white linen. It's filled with Swedish delicacies, most notably pancakes with lingonberries. We were going to be interviewed on the following day for the purpose of ascertaining that we are not fugitive criminals. Since we are going to be questioned separately, we resolved to tell the facts without embellishments or distortions. This way our stories would jive and would not raise any suspicion. I had one lingering concern. Count Folke Bernadotte, a Swedish diplomat who was mediating the conflict between the Arabs and the Jews on behalf of the United Nations, was assassinated in Jerusalem a few months ago by Jewish terrorists, believe it or not. I worried that there would be some resentment and suspicion when they found out that we were in Palestine before we came to Poland. Fortunately, the interrogation was conducted. The interrogation conducted by bald-headed plainclothesmen was straightforward and conducted with no hiccups. This morning I met 2 Danish fellows who occupied the adjacent cell. They had the run of the place and came and went as they pleased. When I asked them what they were in for, they laughed and told me they had no money and no place to stay, so the police let them bed down for a couple of nights. I told the constable and knew they liked the Danes. We have not committed any crime, so could we go out for a walk or go to a movie? After consulting the sergeant, they agreed to let us go. Our first stop was the post office, where we dispatched a 4-letter telegram to mother and father, arrived safely in Sweden. We then went to see Incendiary Blonde, a technical movie with Led Zeppelin. I'm not going to continue reading, but this, we stayed, this was February, and we spent almost up until the end of October, we spent in Sweden. I worked in a factory for a while, a truck factory, and then we came to the States. So I left out a few things, and it tells you of 2 two big adventures. One in which way I was on a sort of, unwilling participant. This one, something that I plotted and accomplished. And if there are any questions, I'll be delighted to answer them.
Thank you so much.
I thought this would take less. It's almost just like an hour, but I thought there would be enough time left for questions. Yeah.
You said that you were an architect.
I
where?
still am.
Okay. When and where did you go to architecture school?
I went to Cooper Union in New York when I arrived in the States, and that was just a wonderful thing because Cooper Union was a free, school at that time. Now it is not anymore. And then I was drafted into the Army. I spent 2 years in the U.S. Army. After I was released, I spent 1 more year at Cooper Union. Cooper Union in those days, in the 50s, did not grant degrees, so I transferred to the University of Michigan, where I got my degree. Speaking of University of Michigan, Esther, in introducing me, mentioned, that she's also a survivor. Now, I don't know if any of you ever heard the name. Raoul Wallenberg. Now, we had this sports basketball, and by coincidence, amazingly, Esther shows me a passport issued by Wallenberg. And Wallenberg was an architect graduate of the University of Michigan, graduated for 19, yeah. And I've been religiously sending, every Christmas I've been sending a small sum of money to the University of Michigan in memory of his scholarship and memory of Raoul Wallenberg. He unfortunately was taken by the Russians and died in a gulag somewhere. No one really knows how, but he was an incredible man.
What years were you in Ann Arbor? What years were you in Ann Arbor?
I was in Ann Arbor from 1955 to 58. Yes?
Why did you go from Palestine back to Poland?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'll tell you why. We didn't intend to, because we didn't want to stay there for the war. So my parents said, we went through one war, and we were already registered for immigration, but we had to wait our turn on the Polish quota. So they said, well, you can go to Europe, and go to Munich, which she had a cousin who was in Munich. And I was sent to Tel Aviv to get a couple of passports, Polish passports. And when I arrived at the Polish consulate, they said, well, you have a choice of either, for £5 you get a passport for return to Poland, and for £10 you get a passport which is valid for travel. I thought, I don't need to, hello? Can you hear me? I didn't need to travel. I think something happened to it.
Oh, I turned it off, I'm sorry.
Where's the handheld mic?
Oh, no, I didn't turn that off.
No, okay, it's okay now. And so being this, my parents didn't have much money, and being frugal, I was not stingy but frugal. I got a cheaper passport, and when we got to Prague, I wanted to get over to Germany, and we failed to do it. So wound up in Poland because of the cheaper passport. Yes.
Did you ever have contact with the captain of that ship?
Oh yes, I met him in Stockholm. He took me out to one of those fantastic, restaurants deep in the valleys of the building, in a cave restaurant. We had a great time together. He was a wonderful man.
I didn't realize that there was a Jewish militia working in Stockholm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was,
Well known. Yeah, they worked in the camps.
It was formed by the Germans. They wanted some assistance in there. And, some of the Jewish militia, and some of them were very friendly. But there were others who, unfortunately, were, just to ingratiate themselves to the Germans. They're not so nice.
We have those in the Trump
The
administration.
funny thing is that a lot of, when I talk to the youngsters, they always ask me about connection of that, those, incidents of what's happening today. And it occurred to me the other day when somebody said, and I'll volunteer what some of my thoughts on that something. When I hear people referred to as animals, I remember what the Germans called Jews, Slavs, Untermenschen. Untermenschen means subhuman. Now, if you're subhuman, naturally, there's no problem in killing. It's an animal. So if you're an animal, it's the same kind of thing. And on the other hand, somebody said recently that comparing our current, situation to Nazis and Hitler is a bridge too far. And I agree with them wholeheartedly. But I cannot help that some of the things that I experienced, I see today, evoke memories.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate to evoke those memories. Yes.
She can go. Billy. My family came over, for reasons of similar design, why they left the Polish and Germany and all of those countries. I just finished my 5th year of architecture and graduated.
Congratulations.
And thank you. From Augusta.
Oh.
Sorry, I hate to shout at me.
Oh.
I was tinkering with the idea while you were telling your story, maybe as a metaphor to the rest of us that are, have our little daily struggles. If you could tell yourself in one of those letters, maybe like a go for it or don't go outside today, kind of thing, what would you have told yourself in one of those letters?
I'm not sure I get it.
What was your motivation that you could look back and tell yourself do this, go for this, or?
I think that it was just circumstances, you just you find yourself in a certain situation and you come to a certain conclusion and it's all, a lot of it's just pure luck. A lot of it's pure luck.
Instinct is
And
right,
so just,
yeah.
I was motivated, I'm still motivated these days. But, I was motivated to write a book. I never wrote a book. It was nothing to do with architecture. But, yes.
Where were your parents while you were traveling from
they
Israel?
were in Palestine.
Did they stay there? Or
No, they came here following us. They came here in 52 and 53.
Okay.
My father had to, at age 50-something, he had to go and intern, to get his license. He spent a year as an intern in a hospital in New York City. He had a practice in New York.
And what about your brother Oscar?
My brother Oscar, well, I told you, he said on books, he wound up going to MIT, where he got a bachelor's, a master's, and a PhD. He died in 2001. And he worked for the energy department, among other things. And I think that he was involved in a lot of the testing of nuclear out in space. He went to Hawaii. And he died of thyroid cancer, although his sons don't believe it. I think that it was connected with his work.
He died of what?
Thyroid cancer.
Oh, right, yeah.
Thank you.